All right, everyone. So it's just clicked over to 3:30, so we might make a start and people can join in as they're able. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Bonnie Eklund. I'm the Manager Program Operations for TAAHC, and I'll be presenting today with Associate Professor Ray Thomas, who is our TAAHC Research Education Lead. So this session today is focusing on the Clinician Researcher Fellowship Scheme funding that TAAHC is offering. And so today's session will talk a little bit about, provide a bit of background about TAAHC, run through the eligibility and selection criteria for the scheme, and we will finish up with some frequently asked questions. So if you have a question that you would like us to answer, feel free to pop it in the chat as we go along, and there'll also be space at the end for you to, we'll throw it open to questions. So for those of you who've already seen our seed funding information session, some of this information you would have already seen, but obviously once we get into the nitty gritty of the scheme, it will be a little bit different. So I'll just start sharing my screen.
No, it's fine. Yeah, good.
So as I said, this is the information session for our Clinician Researcher Fellowship Scheme. Applications to the scheme are open now, and they close midnight, 3rd of July. So for those of you who aren't aware, TAAHC is a research collaboration between the 5 hospital and health services in Northern Queensland, so from Mackay out to Northwest and then up through to Torres and Cape. And members also include the Northern Queensland Primary Health Network, the Queensland Aboriginal and Islander Health Council, and James Cook University. So TAAHC was established as a company in 2019, and its focus is to build capacity and capability for locally relevant research that addresses the key health challenges in our region. So to meet those challenges, TAAHC developed, once it was incorporated as an entity, a series of research themes, which are listed on the slide. And these have really been, they were developed in consultation with our members, and they really speak to and try to address the health challenges that are prevalent in our region. So our research themes are service delivery to regional, rural and remote and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population, so very reflective of the makeup of the Northern Queensland population. Innovative health workforce models, so how our health workforce delivers care. Non-communicable diseases that have a high prevalence in our region, and also infectious diseases, again, very much reflective of the health challenges for Northern Queensland. So you can find these research themes on our website, so taahc.org.au, and our website also has lots of information about TAAHC, who we are, what we do, our history, and it also contains our research strategy. So our research strategy runs from 2023 to 2026. It's our second research strategy, and it defines TAAHC's mission and purpose. And that's really important once you start getting into and addressing the selection criteria for the fellowships. It also outlines the aims and the actions that we will take to achieve those aims. And it has a lot of background information around how research themes were developed and some of the challenges in our region that TAAHC's trying to address. So that research strategy is available on the TAAHC website. So if you just pop onto the TAAHC homepage, you'll see one of the things is research. Cover over that, you'll see research strategy, and then you can download our current TAAHC research strategy. So that's what that web page looks like. That's where our strategy is. That's kind of what the first page of the research strategy looks like. So I'd encourage anyone who's thinking of applying to the fellowship scheme to have a look at our research strategy to really get to understand what TAAHC is and what we do. So the Clinical Research Fellowship Scheme, we have developed funding rules for that scheme, which is available on the TAAHC website. And so if you pop on there, you'll be able to download the funding rules as PDF. And in those funding rules, you'll see the aims and the objectives of the scheme. So what is the purpose of the scheme? And I guess the key thing to note here is that the objectives and the aim scheme is really twofold. So yes, we want to provide time for a clinician researcher to undertake research, but we also want that research to be aligned with our TAAHC strategic research themes, so the ones that were on the previous slide, and have the potential to deliver better health outcomes for Northern Queensland. So there is that twofold aim that I think applicants need to be aware of when they're looking to apply for the scheme. It's providing time for someone to undertake research, but also that research needs to be in an area that aligns with TAAHC research themes. So also really important when you download those funding rules from our website is to have a look at the scheme eligibility rules. So we will do, for every application that's submitted to us, we will do an initial eligibility check. And if your application is not eligible, it won't proceed to that next round of peer review. So it's really important that you're aware of those eligibility issues. I won't read them all out. I guess thing to note for this fellowship scheme is there's really sort of two sets of eligibility. There's eligibility points that apply to all the applicants. And then there is, which are listed there. And then there is really the specific eligibility around who can apply in the two categories of our clinician researcher fellowship scheme. So there are two categories. One is for early career clinician researchers, and one is for mid-career clinician researchers. So you will need to, in your application, identify under which category you're applying as your fellowship. The thing to note as well in the eligibility is that one of the criteria is that your fellowship research project, so what you're going to do if you were given a fellowship, has to align with one of our TAAHC strategic research themes, one or more. So that is an eligibility issue, and that is what we will consider upfront when your application is submitted. The next set aside to talk about the selection criteria for the fellowship scheme. So I will hand over to Ray to talk you through those.
Thanks, Bonnie. So quite a number of you were at the last session, and so I'm going to again use this time to speak to people and walk through people who potentially haven't applied for a lot of grants before. So for those who have, my apologies, you will know some of this information, but for those who haven't, I think it's really important that we touch base. I think the biggest tip that Bonnie and I want to make sure that all of you sort of think about is to look at those rules, look at our purpose and mission, and to make sure our strategic themes align, your project aligns with our strategic themes. For the selection criterion, it's really important to think about downloading the rules, but also download the application preview, because you'll need to have those two things in front of you when you're thinking about how to respond to some of these criteria. So the first one for this scheme will be capacity and capability, and it has a weighting of 30% for your total overall score. We're interested in several different categories, and these are outlined separately in the application form. So we will be asking you for some of your research outputs, and it's kind of a broad perspective of research outputs. We're going to ask you for your contributions to clinical practice, policy change, or better health outcomes. What have you done? For mid-career fellowships only, we're going to ask you what kind of research mentoring activities have you actually undertaken or provided, would be a better word for that. And also we're looking for your vision. What's your career vision? What are your developmental plans for the next 5 years? And this is where it's really important to have a look at that application preview page before you actually start writing, because each of those sections have different word limits. So know what they are before you actually get to the last day when you're trying to upload everything. Thanks, Bonnie. The second criterion is project impact, which is weighted at 40%. And these were specifically after how your project will address systemic and significant healthcare and health system need in one of our strategic themes. We're going to ask about how has your project got the potential to drive change in health equity outcomes, practice and policy. And we're also asking you to have a look at what are your expected project outcomes. And you have to do that in up to 700 words. Thanks, Bonnie. And project methodology is weighted at 30%. And this is the final criterion for this application, for this scheme. We're asking you to tell us what your research question is. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Be very clear about that. Tell us what it is quite clearly. We're going to ask you then, what's the method you're going to use? How are you going to address, how are you going to approach trying to address your research question? And tell us about the tools, the techniques, who are the participants, what interventions or controls are you going to do? Statistical approaches, what are you going to use? Be it qualitative approaches, quantitative approaches, and how are you going to data collect and how are you going to keep those data safe? We're also talking about indicating whether the project has the potential to generate pilot data. Now, remember, for TAAHC, we are all about building capacity and capability. So we want to make sure that these schemes have the potential to go on, and you guys get to go on and have bigger and better grants all the time. So what are you going to do to try and generate some good quality pilot data that's going to help leverage that for the next time? You need to tell us up to 500 words for that project methodology. Thanks, Bonnie. We're also going to ask you to address the NHMRC Indigenous Research Excellence criteria. That's really important because in our region, it's important for us, right? So it may or it may not apply to your project, but you will need to tell us how it does or why it does not apply to your project. And if it does apply to your project, we're particularly interested in understanding, how are you going to demonstrate that you've got substantial community engagement, that it's going to benefit the community, it's sustainable, it's transferable, and it builds capacity in the First Nations communities. Thanks, Bonnie. The reason why you need to have those both applications in front of you is because in the selection criteria, you already know those, but in the application form, there's a couple of extra bits and pieces that you will need to respond to. For example, you need to give us a project summary of up to 100 words, and you need to make sure that's really crisp, and you need to nail that quite well. You'll need to articulate and actually tick a box which one of our strategic research themes aligns with your project. You're going to have to tell us what your project milestones are and how or how not you're going to involve consumers, up to 100 words. References are optional, I think, but probably suggested strongly. And then you need some letters of support as well. Last one for me. General tips. All right, start early, start now. You've all probably got ideas. That's why you're here. You want to think about things. Start thinking about it now. Start writing, start drafting. Like I said, download all the forms before the due date, goodness me, and before you start to write. Know our themes, our research themes, and make sure you're very careful about your project aligning to those. But really make your application sing, make it meaningful to the scheme and our strategy and our mission and our purpose. Write for a person who is knowledgeable, but not knowledgeable necessarily in your area. There's a broad range of people who are reviewing these. So we're not bad, but we might not know everything. So tell us about your project in a way that's easy for everybody to understand. Get feedback about it. Ask for critical feedback. Ask for someone to pull it apart and say what they don't understand. Get critical feedback here, and then use that feedback to revise it. And you should be thinking about revising these several times before you're ready to submit your application. And that's just grantsmanship. That's nothing new about that. Okay, thanks, Bonnie. That's me.
Thanks, Ray. So Ray mentioned a couple of times now the downloading the actual application form that you'll be able to fill out online. So TAAHC, we put our grant applications through Smiley Grant, so it's an online form that you'll need to submit. And when you jump onto the TAAHC website, you'll find the link to the Smiley Grants portal. Once you click that and go, yep, I'm ready to apply, this is the screen that you will see. So you can, of course, just jump right in, start your submission, take a look around. But if you want to do a bit more cautious approach, you can, if you look at where that magnifying glass is, you can preview the online forms. You'll actually see online what you'll need to submit. Or you can also do, which I think we would recommend, is you can download the preview form. So you'll be able to download as a PDF. It will show you all the sections that you will need to complete, and you can use that to then develop your application offline in a Word document or however you'd like to do it. And then you can, when you're ready, jump back in, cut and paste into that online Smiley Grant system. We've used Smiley Grants for number of, I think 1 or 2 years now for our previous funding rounds, and we haven't really had any difficulties with applicants accessing the portal. But if you do run into any issues, the portal, before you log in, has our contact details. So that's my phone number there, and also the taahc.gcu.edu.au address. You're able to get in touch with either both Ray and myself. So if you do have any issues with the portal, just give us a call or an email, and we can troubleshoot that. But again, I wouldn't expect that anyone has any issues with that. So we'll just end today's section on some questions that we've already received. These will go up on the website. There will be an FAQ section that will populate, and these slides will also be available on our website, along with a recording of this session. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them up in the chat, and I'll also open up to questions at the end if anyone wants to raise a hand and jump in. So one of the questions we received was around whether, if you've had TAAHC Clinician Research and Fellowship funding before, can you apply again? And so there's kind of two aspects to this question. If you go to our funding rules, and again, to Andrea's point, highly recommend that you download those, have them open with you as you complete your application. There's two aspects to whether you can have fellowship funding again. If you had previously applied and held a fellowship in what used to be called the experienced clinician researcher category, which roughly tracks now to our mid-career category, if you've held that experienced clinician researcher category within the last 2 years when you applied, so the day you submit your application, you are ineligible to apply for a fellowship again. So essentially, you can only have that mid-career fellowship every 2 years if you are successful. If you are an early career clinician researcher, we don't have any specific restrictions around the time that you can hold one, as we do with our mid-career. But if you check out the eligibility requirements to submit an application in that early career category, it does say that you haven't held an external competitive research grant previously. An external competitive research grant is pretty much any research grants that's been awarded by someone that's external to your organisation following a competitive process. So TAAHC is a separate entity to its members, so it does fit that definition. So if you have submitted an application and were successful in getting an early career fellowship from TAAHC previously, you're no longer eligible to apply in that category. I'd also note around, if you are a mid-career fellowship holder and you're trying to go again, that all our applications are assessed relative to opportunity, so that the fact that you've previously held a fellowship would be something that the peer review panel would be taking into account when they assess your application. So we've also had a question around if a staff member who's working part-time, can they be given fellowship funding over a period greater than 12 months? So this comes from, in our funding rules, we say that the minimum fellowship duration, regardless of whether you're early or mid-career category, is 3 months up to a maximum of 12 months. So with the funding rules as written at the moment, no, the maximum duration, the minimum durations is not dependent on your current FTE. It is just a fixed period for the fellowship. Also, the fellowship says that your total salary, drawn from all sources, shouldn't exceed the salary that you would ordinarily have received in your substantive clinical position. So our funding rules say that you can't use the fellowship funds to essentially increase your salary. So we've had some queries around people. If someone is working part-time, can they use the fellowship to add on an extra day, say, to their substantive position? And the way the funding rules are written at the moment, no, that's not the case. So you can't use this fellowship to bump up your FTE or your salary. It is meant to be around buying some of your time out to undertake research. I will say, though, that for both these queries, we can feed that. We know that there's, for some of the small and rural remote facilities, that sometimes it is difficult to arrange backfill, and there is that provision in the funding rules that if that is the case for you, you can make a case for an alternate use of your fellowship funds. But certainly at the moment, there is no flexibility around taking the fellowship over 12 months or bumping up people's salaries. But if that is an issue that people would like to raise, we can feed that through to our TAAHC clinical leadership group, who develop the funding rules for these schemes, and to the TAAHC board, for something to consider in future funding rules. But at the moment, there is no flexibility with respect to those queries. So there's also a question around how the salary costs are used. So the funding rules say that we will support up to 0.2 FT or 20% full-time equivalent for the duration of your fellowship to a maximum funding amount of 50,000. That's all our funding rules say. So when it actually comes to your actual pattern of work, so whether that 20% full-time FTE you might choose to take as, 2 days out of every month consecutively, or 1 day a week, or whether you want to work it in a, in a compressed block, we don't specify that. So your actual pattern of work will be between you and your lead organisation, but so provided that you are over the lifetime of the fellowship committing whatever FTE you have said you will commit, then we, TAAHC doesn't need to specify those patterns of work. So there is some flexibility for people there. Final question we had around is, can research mentors be from non-TAAHC members? So if you're applying in the early career category, we ask that you tell us the name of someone who will be a research mentor for you, so it can help you along your fellowship journey if you're successful. We do say that the research mentor needs to meet the eligibility requirements of the mid-career fellowship category. So you can see, you'll be able to read those yourselves in the funding rules that are on the slide here. But we don't specify that they need to be from a TAAHC member. So your research mentor can be employed or associated with an organisation who's not one of our TAAHC members. So remember, our TAAHC members are the 8 organisations that I talked about earlier, and they're listed on our website if you if you need to look any of those up. I will say though that given the aim of the fellowship is to build research and capability in alignment with TAAHC strategic research themes and for people who are based in Northern Queensland, and given that you need to outline your capacity and capability to do that as part of our selection criteria, you might just give a bit of thought around whether a research mentor who is based outside the region, whether they can still help you deliver on a project that based within the region when you're at the selection criteria. But certainly in terms of eligibility, we're not requiring that they have to be from a TAAHC mentor. So I guess I will throw that open to questions either to Ray or myself, and I'll just stop sharing my screen. So feel free to put questions in the chat or throw a hand up and I will stop talking to allow people to do that. So again, I think I mentioned earlier, but if you do have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us. It's taahc@jcu.edu.au. The contact details are also on our website. If you just Google TAAHC in Google, we're pretty much now the first search result that comes up. So you should be able to find that. And as I said, this session is being recorded, will be available on the website along with the slides, and we'll also pop up some FAQs. It will take us just a little while to process the recording, so maybe check back tomorrow afternoon and the website should be populated. I'll just give another 30 seconds. Sorry, any other questions?
Nothing in the chat. All good.
No, all good. Okay then, unless anyone has any last minute, I will leave it there. Thank you everyone for taking the time to attend. Hope you found it useful, and hopefully we see some applications from some of you. All right, thanks everyone. Bye.